Have you ever watched your entire family turn against you at your own birthday party? My name is Gloria Torres, and on my 32nd birthday, my millionaire father stood up in front of 50 guests at a 2 Michelin-star restaurant and called me a burden, a failure, and an embarrassment to the Torres name. My sister slid a t-shirt across the table with "Another Year of Disappointment" printed on it. My mother laughed. But what they didn't know was that I'd been waiting 5 years for this exact moment. If you're watching this, please subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. I'm Gloria Torres, and this is the story of how I turned the worst birthday of my life into the best revenge served ice cold. L'Espalier wasn't just a restaurant, it was a temple to wealth, the kind of place where the sommelier wore white gloves and the amuse-bouche cost more than my weekly groceries. Crystal chandeliers cast golden light over tables dressed in Irish linen, and the air carried hints of truffle and privilege. I sat at the center table, the one my father had reserved 6 months in advance. Around me, 50 of Boston's elite sipped Chateau Petrus 1982, $8,000 per bottle, as Dad made sure to announce. Investment bankers, hedge fund managers, tech CEOs. I counted exactly 50 guests, each worth at least 8 figures. My simple black dress, the only one I owned that was appropriate for such occasions, stood out like a sparrow among peacocks. The women wore Versace and Valentino. Their diamonds caught the light with every gesture. I'd chosen this dress deliberately, though none of them knew that yet. The 12-course tasting menu arrived on Limoges porcelain, each plate a small artwork. Christofle silverware flanked the settings, heavy and ornate. The waiter explained each course in reverent tones. Osetra caviar with quail egg and champagne foam. Wagyu beef with black truffle reduction. I pushed the food around my plate, my stomach too knotted to eat. This wasn't a birthday celebration. It was a stage, and I was about to become the entertainment. My father checked his Patek Philippe, the one worth more than my annual teaching salary. Almost time for his speech. He'd been drinking since noon, his face flushed with expensive wine and anticipated cruelty. The irony wasn't lost on me. All this wealth, all this luxury, built on the foundation my grandfather laid with his bare hands. And here they were, about to humiliate the only person who actually understood what he'd built and why. Thomas Torres commanded attention even while seated. At 58, he wore power like his tailored Tom Ford suit, naturally, expensively, oppressively. CEO of Torres Holdings for 15 years, he'd transformed Grandpa's construction company into a real estate empire. He never missed a chance to remind me that Victoria made more in a month than I did in a year. My stepmother Eleanor sat to his right, her third glass of champagne making her Botoxed face attempt something like amusement. She'd married Dad 2 years after Mom's death, when I was 12 and still grieving. Eleanor came from old money, the kind that whispered instead of shouted, and she'd never let me forget I was the daughter of Dad's starter wife. Victoria, my half-sister, glowed with the confidence of the perpetually favored. At 28, she was already vice president of operations, a position created specifically for her. Her Hermès suit matched her Hermès bag, both gifts from Daddy for her latest acquisition deal. She kept checking her phone, probably monitoring the $50 million project she'd been bragging about all week. And then there was me. Gloria Torres, 32 today, public school teacher at Boston Elementary. The family disappointment, the one who threw away her advantages to waste her life with other people's children. They thought I was weak because I was quiet. They thought I was stupid because I chose teaching over corporate law. They thought I was defeated because I never fought back. Dad had actually said once, at last year's Christmas dinner, "At least we have Victoria to carry on the family legacy. Thank God Father isn't alive to see what Gloria's become." If only he knew what Grandpa had really thought. If only he knew what papers sat in my Hermes Birkin bag, the last gift Grandpa ever gave me. Harold Torres built his empire with calloused hands and an immigrant's hunger. He'd come from Mexico with nothing, worked construction for 10 years, then started his own company in 1978. By the time I was born, Torres Construction was worth 50 million. By the time he died, Torres Holdings was worth 10 times that. But to me, he was just Grandpa, the one who taught me chess in his study, who said education was the only wealth nobody could steal. While Dad groomed Victoria for business, Grandpa and I talked about books, justice, and why he'd named the company Torres Holdings. Because a name should mean something, mija. He died 5 years ago, on my 27th birthday. The last time I saw him, he was in the hospital, machines beeping around us. Dad was in Shanghai closing a deal. Victoria was at a yacht party in Miami. Eleanor was at a spa in Switzerland. Just Grandpa and me, like always. Gloria, he'd said, his voice paper-thin, but his eyes sharp as ever. There's something you need to know. Marcus Chen has papers for you, but you can't open them until you're 32. Why 32, Grandpa? He'd smiled then, that crooked smile that meant he knew something others didn't. Because by 32, you'll know exactly who you are, and they'll have shown you exactly who they are. The Hermes Birkin bag arrived a week after his funeral, delivered by Marcus Chen himself. Inside was a sealed envelope with instructions not to open until my 32nd birthday. But Marcus had winked when he handed it over. Your grandfather was a smart man, Gloria. He saw everything. The bag sat in my closet for 5 years, waiting. Like me. Watching my family reveal themselves, insult by insult, humiliation by humiliation. 5 years of family dinners where my teacher's salary was the punchline. 5 years of Victoria's promotions celebrated while my Teacher of the Year award was met with participation trophy jokes. 5 years of Eleanor suggesting I was still single because successful men want successful women. Every insult, every humiliation, I filed them away like evidence. There was the Thanksgiving when Dad made me sit at the kids' table, since you like children so much. The Christmas when Victoria gave me a self-help book called It's Never Too Late to Change Careers. The family reunion where Eleanor introduced me as Thomas's daughter from his first marriage. She teaches, bless her heart. Marcus Chen called me every 6 months, always the same message. Just checking in, Gloria. Remember, patience is a virtue. He couldn't tell me what was in the envelope, but he'd hint. Your grandfather spent 2 years setting things up. He wanted to make sure everything was ironclad. I started noticing things. How Dad's signature was on every major decision, but Grandpa's trust controlled the shares. How Victoria's name was on the executive roster, but not the ownership documents. How Eleanor spent money that wasn't technically hers. The hardest part was staying silent when Dad would lecture me about contributing to society in meaningful ways, while charging his clients millions for buildings that would sit empty. Or when Victoria would mock my classroom supplies, while expensing $10,000 dinners as client development. I counted down days on a calendar hidden in my closet. 1,825 days. 1,500. 1,000. 500, 100, 10. Today, my 32nd birthday. The day Grandpa's patience would become my power. The day 5 years of strategic silence would end with words that would change everything. The champagne in my glass felt heavier than lead. Almost time. The 6th course arrived. Lobster thermidor with microgreens I couldn't identify. Around me, conversations flowed about acquisitions and IPOs, the casual wealth speak that excluded me as effectively as a foreign language. Not one person had wished me happy birthday. The Waterford acquisition is performing beyond projections, Victoria announced to the table, her voice carrying that particular tone she used when wanting Dad's attention. 50 million in revenue this quarter alone. That's my girl, Dad beamed, raising his glass toward her. A real Torres, building something meaningful. Eleanor touched his arm. Darling, aren't you going to say something? It is Gloria's event. She said event, like others might say colonoscopy. Soon, he said, checking his watch again. Let everyone finish their course first. The investment banker to my left was explaining cryptocurrency to his mistress. Everyone knew she wasn't his wife. The pharmaceutical executive across from me was on his third story about his son at Harvard Law. Nobody spoke to me directly, though I caught the occasional pitying glance. I recognized the setup now. Dad had invited his most important associates, people whose opinions he valued, whose respect he craved. He wanted an audience for whatever he'd planned. Victoria kept smirking at her phone, typing rapidly. She'd been building to something all week, dropping hints about a special surprise for my birthday. The gift bag beside her chair, distinctive Hermes orange, sat like a threat. "Before we continue," Dad said suddenly, standing up with the fluid motion of someone who'd had just enough alcohol to feel invincible, but not enough to stumble. "I'd like to say a few words about today's occasion." The conversations died. 50 faces turned toward us. The champagne in Dad's hand caught the light like liquid gold. My heart rate stayed steady. I'd been preparing for this moment for exactly 5 years. "Ladies and gentlemen," Dad began, his voice carrying the false warmth of a practiced speaker. "Today marks a special occasion. My eldest daughter, Gloria, has reached another year of—" He paused, letting the anticipation build. "Existence." Uncomfortable chuckles rippled through the crowd. "Now, as you all know, I'm a man who values achievement, success, legacy." He gestured toward Victoria. "My daughter Victoria here just closed a $50 million deal. At 28, she's already vice president of our operations." Victoria preened. Eleanor smiled. I kept my face neutral, my hands steady on my lap. "And then there's Gloria." His tone shifted, darker now. 32 years old today. 32 years of potential, of advantages, of opportunities. And what does she have to show for it? The room had gone completely silent. Even the waitstaff froze mid-pour. "A teaching certificate and a classroom full of other people's children." He raised his glass higher. "So today, I'd like to propose a toast. To my daughter Gloria, living proof that not all investments pay off. A burden on the family name, a failure to launch, and an embarrassment to everything the Torres legacy represents." Several guests shifted uncomfortably. The pharmaceutical executive's mistress actually gasped. But nobody intervened. Nobody defended me. Dad wasn't done. 32 years, and the only thing she's managed to achieve is making the rest of us look better by comparison. "So here's to you, Gloria, to another year of disappointment." He drank deeply. Eleanor raised her glass with enthusiasm. Victoria was already reaching for the gift bag. I didn't move, didn't flinch, didn't give them the tears they expected. Because in exactly 3 minutes, Thomas Torres would learn what happened when you confused silence with surrender. "Wait, wait!" Victoria stood, her voice bright with manufactured excitement. "Before we continue, I have Gloria's birthday present." She pulled out a white t-shirt from the Hermes bag, holding it up for everyone to see. In bold black letters across the front, "Another year of disappointment." Smaller text below, "Participation trophy recipient since 1992. "I had it custom made," she announced proudly. "Thought it would be perfect for her to wear at school. You know, truth in advertising." Eleanor's giggles sounded exactly like coins dropping into a piggy bank. High, metallic, soulless. Victoria slid the shirt across the table, the fabric catching on the baccarat crystal water glasses. "Go on, Gloria. Hold it up. Let everyone see." The CFO of a tech startup was shaking his head slightly. A woman I recognized as a federal judge pressed her lips together in disapproval. But still, nobody said anything. This was Thomas Torres's table, his show, his rules. I picked up the shirt slowly, examining it as if it were fascinating. The fabric was high quality. Of course it was. Victoria never did anything halfway, even cruelty. "Thank you, Victoria," I said, my voice perfectly calm. "This is certainly memorable." My hand moved to the Hermes Birkin bag beside my chair, the one Grandpa had given me, though they'd never asked about it. My fingers found the leather envelope inside, the one I'd carried every day for the past week, knowing this moment would come. "You know," I said, standing slowly, deliberately. I should probably say something too. After all, it is my birthday, Dad smirked. Going to thank us for 32 years of patience? Something like that, I replied, pulling out the envelope. I'd like to share something Grandpa left me. The smirk faltered. Just slightly. But I saw it. If you've ever been underestimated by your own family, type respect in the comments. And please, hit that subscribe button, because what happens next will change everything you thought you knew about sweet revenge. Let's continue. Before you embarrass yourself further, Dad said quickly, his voice taking on a harder edge, let's discuss what really needs to happen here. He pulled out his own envelope. I recognized the law firm's letterhead. This is a transfer of inheritance rights. Sign it over to someone who actually deserves it. Victoria has the vision, the education, the capability to handle what father left behind. Teachers don't run multi-million-dollar companies, Gloria, Eleanor added, her voice dripping condescension. It's just common sense. You barely make $40,000 a year, Victoria chimed in. I made that last week. How could you possibly manage a real business? The papers slid across the table toward me, stopping next to the humiliation t-shirt. A pen followed. Mont Blanc, naturally. Sign it, Dad commanded. Do the right thing for once, or I'll cut off your health insurance, your phone plan, and that little supplementary check I send you every month. You think living is hard now? Try doing it completely alone. Several guests were looking at their plates now, uncomfortable with the public shakedown. But the majority watched with the fascination of Romans at the Colosseum. You're right, I said, not touching the papers. A teacher making $40,000 a year couldn't possibly understand business. Finally, some sense, Dad muttered. But here's the thing, I continued, my hand steady on my grandfather's envelope. Grandpa didn't leave the company to a teacher. He left it to his granddaughter, the one who sat with him every Sunday learning about integrity while you were golfing with clients. The one who was there when he died while you were in Shanghai. Don't be dramatic. The one, I said, opening the envelope. He trusted with everything. The federal judge leaned forward slightly. She knew something significant was happening. The investment banker stopped mid-conversation with his mistress. Even the waitstaff had found reasons to linger nearby, sensing the shift in atmosphere. This is family business, someone muttered, but they didn't look away. She's really going to do this here? Another voice whispered. The pharmaceutical executive cleared his throat. Thomas, perhaps this isn't the appropriate— Stay out of it, Richard, Dad snapped, his mask of civility cracking. My daughter needs to learn her place. Her place? The judge spoke up, surprising everyone. At her own birthday dinner? Judge Martinez, Dad's voice turned oily, political. You don't understand the full situation. Gloria has limitations. We're trying to protect her from embarrassment. Looks like you're the one creating the embarrassment, she replied coolly. Victoria's face flushed. She's a teacher. She chose to waste her life. Why should she get anything? Because it wasn't your grandfather's to give, I said quietly, pulling out the documents. It was never Dad's to control. And it was never yours to inherit, Victoria. The papers in my hand bore the official seal of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. The notary stamps gleamed gold in the chandelier light. 50 pairs of eyes watched me stand, waiting for me to crumble like I always had before. Some with pity, some with curiosity, a few with what might have been hope. But I wasn't the same woman who'd walked in here an hour ago. I wasn't even the same woman who'd been insulted 5 minutes ago. I was Harold Torres's granddaughter, and I was done being anyone's disappointment. My fingers found the phone in my pocket, Marcus Chen's number already dialed, waiting for speaker mode. I looked at the transfer papers Dad had slid across the table, then at his face, so confident, so certain of my weakness. You're absolutely right, I said softly. The room exhaled collectively. Dad's shoulders relaxed. Victoria smirked. I'm just a teacher, I continued, my voice steady, almost apologetic. I chose a classroom over a boardroom. I chose children over contracts. Finally, Eleanor muttered. Some self-awareness. I make $40,000 a year. I buy my clothes at Target. I drive a 10-year-old Honda. I picked up the Mont Blanc pen, testing its weight. I'm everything you say I am. A disappointment, a failure, an embarrassment to the Torres name. Dad was already reaching for the papers, ready to witness my signature. Victoria had her phone out, probably ready to announce her new position to her social media followers. But you forgot something, I said, setting the pen down without signing. I'm also Harold Torres's granddaughter, and while I may not be a businesswoman, I pulled out the first document from Grandpa's envelope. He was. The legal seal caught the light. The header read, Last Will and Testament of Harold Jesus Torres. Dad's face went white. That's not possible. I saw the will. I was there when... When you saw the decoy will? I asked. The one Grandpa filed publicly to keep you from interfering? Or the real one, filed under seal with the probate court, with instructions to be opened only on my 32nd birthday? My phone buzzed. Marcus Chen, right on time. Should I put him on speaker? I asked the room. Or would you prefer to hear this privately, Dad? For the first time in my life, Thomas Torres had no words. The silence stretched like a held breath. Victoria's phone slipped from her fingers, clattering against her plate. Eleanor's champagne glass trembled in her hand. This is ridiculous, Dad managed, but his voice had lost its authority. Father's will was clear. The company passes to his son, then to his grandchildren equally. The public will said that, I agreed, unfolding the documents with deliberate slowness. But Grandpa filed 2 wills, perfectly legal in Massachusetts, as long as the second one is properly witnessed and explicitly revokes the first. That's not... You can't... I pressed speaker on my phone. Marcus Chen's calm voice filled the restaurant. Good evening, Gloria. Happy birthday. Are you ready to proceed? Hello, Marcus. Yes, I think it's time. For the record, Marcus said, his voice carrying the weight of legal authority, I am Marcus Chen, senior partner at Chen, Whitfield, and Associates. I served as Harold Torres's personal attorney for the last 15 years of his life. I can confirm that the document Gloria is holding is genuine, properly executed, and legally binding. The federal judge stood up slightly, her professional interest clearly piqued. Mr. Chen, are you saying there was a sealed will? Indeed, Judge Martinez. Filed with the probate court 5 years ago with specific instructions for release on Gloria Torres's 32nd birthday. I have copies here in my office, all properly notarized and witnessed. But why? Victoria started. Should I read the relevant passage? I asked, looking directly at my father. His face had gone from white to a concerning shade of red. Don't you dare! But I was already reading, my voice clear and steady in the silent restaurant. To my granddaughter, Gloria Maria Torres, I read, my voice carrying across the silent restaurant. I leave 51% of all shares in Torres Holdings to be transferred upon her 32nd birthday. The sound Victoria made was inhuman, somewhere between a gasp and a shriek. This controlling interest, I continued, is given with full voting rights and immediate effect upon the stated date, superseding any and all previous arrangements. That's impossible! Dad slammed his hand on the table, making the crystals sing. I own 40%. Victoria has 10. Eleanor has... Nothing, Marcus Chen's voice cut through. Eleanor Torres has no legal stake in Torres Holdings. Thomas, you actually own 20%. Victoria owns 5%. The remaining 44% was held in trust by Harold Torres. But the board meetings, the votes... You've been voting proxy shares, Marcus explained. Harold allowed it to continue as long as certain conditions were met. Those conditions were violated tonight. I pulled out the second document, the share certificates, embossed with gold seals. 51%, controlling interest. As of... I checked my phone. 12 minutes ago, when I officially turned 32. The tech CFO whistled low. That's a complete takeover. It's fraud, Victoria shrieked. You manipulated a dying old man. Mr. Chen, I said calmly, would you please tell everyone when this will was actually executed? 5 years and 6 months ago, Marcus replied, when Harold Torres was in perfect health, of sound mind, and had just received his annual cognitive assessment, which he passed with flying colors. I have the medical records here. Dad's hands were shaking now. Why? Why would he do this? I looked him straight in the eye. Should I tell them, or would you like to guess? There's more, I said, finding the next page. Grandpa was very thorough. Gloria, please. Dad's voice had shifted from anger to something like fear. We can discuss this privately. Like we discussed my birthday privately? I asked. No, I think Grandpa wanted witnesses. That's why he included Clause 7.3. Marcus Chen's voice filled the pause. The behavioral clause. Harold was very specific about that one. I read. Any family member who publicly humiliates, demeans, or attempts to coerce the heir apparent forfeits all executive and board positions within Torres Holdings, effective immediately upon such behavior being witnessed and documented. The federal judge actually laughed, a short, sharp sound of understanding. He knew. Your grandfather knew exactly what would happen. The birthday party, the investment banker breathed. This specific birthday party. He knew they would. Call me a burden? I asked, looking at Dad. A failure? An embarrassment? Yes, he knew. Because you've been doing it for years, but tonight you did it in front of 50 witnesses. You set us up, Eleanor gasped. No, I corrected. Grandpa did, 5 years ago. He knew that by my 32nd birthday, you'd have shown everyone exactly who you are, and you have. The t-shirt, someone whispered. The daughter gave her a t-shirt that said, Another year of disappointment, I confirmed, holding it up. Thank you for that, Victoria. Physical evidence is always helpful. Marcus, Dad said desperately, surely there's room for interpretation? None whatsoever, Marcus replied. In fact, I'm recording this call, as instructed by Harold's will. The behavioral clause is ironclad. As of this moment, Thomas, Eleanor, and Victoria Torres are terminated from all positions within Torres Holdings. You knew, Victoria said, her voice hollow with shock. You've known for 5 years. I've suspected, I corrected. Marcus couldn't tell me the exact contents until today. But yes, I knew Grandpa had made arrangements. Every family dinner, Dad said slowly, the truth dawning on his face. Every insult, every time you were documenting it. I pulled out my phone, opening a folder labeled Evidence. Screenshots of texts, emails, recordings of voicemails. 5 years of carefully preserved abuse. December 15th, 2020, I read. Dad's text. Don't embarrass us by showing up to the gala. Nobody wants to explain what you do for a living. March 3rd, 2021. Victoria deserves the family heirlooms. You wouldn't appreciate them anyway. July 18th, 2022. Voice message from Eleanor. Maybe if you'd made something of yourself, you'd have a husband by now. The pharmaceutical executive's mistress had her phone out, recording everything. Several other guests did too. This would be all over Boston society by morning. But the best part, I continued, is that Marcus wasn't my only witness. Margaret Stone, would you like to stand up? The CFO of Torres Holdings rose from a corner table where she'd been sitting quietly. I've been documenting everything for 3 years, at Harold's request before he died. He asked me to protect Gloria when the time came. Who else? Dad demanded. Who else was in on this? The entire accounting department, Margaret said simply. The legal team, most of the senior management, we've all been waiting for Gloria to turn 32. You conspired. We followed Harold Torres's legal instructions, Marcus corrected. Everything has been done by the book. 3 law firms have reviewed these documents. They're bulletproof. Can you guess what Gloria says next? Comment below with your prediction. If this story resonates with you, please share it with someone who needs to hear that patience and preparation beat revenge every time. Now, let's see how this birthday party ends. I stood fully now, my voice carrying the authority I'd hidden for 5 years. Effective midnight tonight, in 8 minutes, Thomas Torres, you are terminated as CEO of Torres Holdings. The room erupted, guests gasped, phones appeared, and Dad shot to his feet. You can't. Eleanor Torres, you are terminated from the board of directors and banned from all company properties. I turned to my sister. Victoria Torres, you are terminated as Vice President of Operations. Your termination letters will be delivered Monday morning, but your access badges have already been deactivated. This is insane, Victoria screamed. I built the Waterford project. I brought in $50 million in revenue. You worked here 5 years, I corrected. Grandpa built this company in 1978 with his bare hands. You inherited a position. I inherited the company. Security, Dad bellowed. Where's security? You mean my security? I asked. Margaret Stone raised her hand, and 3 uniformed guards entered the restaurant. I hired them this morning. Gentlemen, please stand by. The Torres family will be leaving shortly. The federal judge was openly smiling now. Several other guests applauded softly. The tide had turned completely. Mr. Chen, I said to the phone, please confirm the board meeting scheduled for Monday. 9 a.m. sharp, Marcus confirmed. The agenda includes appointing Gloria Torres as CEO and restructuring the entire executive team. We have quorum without the terminated members. You planned this, Dad said, his voice broken. My own daughter planned this. No, I said quietly. Grandpa planned this. He knew exactly what you were, Thomas. A bully who confused cruelty with strength. He knew you'd destroy me publicly if given the chance. So he gave you the chance, and the consequences. You can't do this! Victoria lunged across the table, trying to grab the documents from my hands. I've worked my entire life for this company. Security stepped forward, but I raised my hand to stop them. Let everyone see who Victoria really was. 5 years, I said calmly as she clawed at the papers. You've worked here 5 years. I've been a Torres for 32 years. I closed the Waterford deal. I brought in the Singapore investors. You lied on the Waterford reports, Margaret Stone interrupted. We have the real numbers. The project is hemorrhaging money. You've been hiding losses for 2 years. Victoria froze, her face draining of color. What? Dad turned to her. Victoria, what is she talking about? It's nothing, Daddy, just temporary cash flow issues. Fraud, Margaret said simply. Securities fraud, to be specific. Gloria could file charges, but she's chosen not to. Yet. Victoria's hands dropped. The fight went out of her like air from a punctured balloon. Sit down, Victoria, I said quietly. You're making a scene. She laughed, a bitter, broken sound. A scene? You just destroyed our entire family in front of 50 people and you're worried about a scene? I didn't destroy anything, I replied. I just stopped letting you destroy me. She grabbed a glass of wine and threw it at me. The burgundy liquid splashed across my simple black dress, dripping onto the pristine white tablecloth. The restaurant gasped collectively. I didn't flinch. Security, please help Ms. Torres gather her things. She's leaving. As the guards approached, Victoria's bravado finally cracked. Please, she whispered. Gloria, please. We're sisters. No, I said simply. We never were. I'll sue you, Dad said, his voice low and dangerous. I'll take this to every court in Massachusetts. This won't hold. You manipulated a sick old man. Thomas, Marcus Chen's voice cut through his threat. I'd be very careful about making accusations you can't support. Harold Torres was examined by 3 independent physicians before executing this will. Would you like me to read their statements? This is coercion. Entrapment. It's neither, Judge Martinez spoke up. I've been watching this very carefully, Mr. Torres. What I've witnessed is a lawful transfer of inherited shares with clear documentation of the behavioral violations that triggered the employment termination clause. You're taking her side? I'm stating legal facts. The judge's voice was ice. And frankly, after watching you humiliate your daughter at her own birthday party, I'm not surprised your father took these precautions. Dad turned desperately to the other guests. Richard, tell them! You've known me for 20 years. Tell them this isn't right! The pharmaceutical executive looked away. Tom, you just called your daughter a failure in front of everyone. You made your bed. Jacobson, you're my lawyer. Not anymore, the man said quietly. Conflict of interest. Besides, I've seen the documents. Chen's right. They're bulletproof. 3 firms confirmed it. Wilson and Associates, Brennan Legal, and Hartley, Smith, and Partners. You all knew? Dad's voice cracked. You all knew this was coming? We suspected, someone said. Harold Torres was a smart man. He wouldn't leave his company to someone who treats family like you do. Dad sank into his chair, suddenly looking all of his 58 years. 30 years. I gave 30 years to that company. And Grandpa gave 50, I reminded him. The difference is, he built it with love. Eleanor had been silent since the revelation, but now she stood, her designer dress rustling like money. Her makeup, so perfect an hour ago, was running in small rivers down her Botoxed face. Gloria, sweetheart, she began, her voice syrupy in a way I'd never heard before. We're family. I'm your stepmother. I raised you. You moved in when I was 12, I corrected. You sent me to boarding school at 13. You forgot my 16th birthday. You tried to exclude me from my own father's wedding. Which part was the raising? I was young. I didn't know how to be a mother. You were 35. You had a child. You just didn't want someone else's. She moved closer, reaching for my hands. I stepped back. Please, she whispered, loud enough for everyone to hear. Where will I go? This is my home, my life. You have a trust fund worth $8 million from your first husband, Margaret Stone announced. Public record. You also own property in Beacon Hill, Martha's Vineyard, and Aspen. You'll be fine. Eleanor's face transformed from pleading to vicious in an instant. You little... Careful, I warned. Anything you say now can be used in the divorce proceedings. What divorce? She shrieked. I looked at Dad. You didn't tell her? The prenup she signed has a morality clause. Publicly humiliating family members voids spousal support. You did that tonight when you laughed at Victoria's t-shirt gift. Dad's lawyer, former lawyer, can confirm. Jacobson nodded reluctantly. It's true. The prenup is very specific. Eleanor turned on Dad. You said the prenup was standard. You said... Family doesn't call family a burden in public, Eleanor, I said quietly. Or laugh when they do. I picked up my champagne glass, still full, untouched throughout dinner. The room fell silent, waiting. Torres Holdings was built on a foundation of hard work, integrity, and respect, I began. My grandfather came to this country with nothing and built something extraordinary, not because he was cruel or clever, but because he understood that business is about people. I looked around the room, making eye contact with each guest. Effective Monday, Torres Holdings will establish the Harold Torres Education Foundation. 10% of all profits will fund scholarships for first-generation college students. Children of our employees will receive full tuition to any state school. Several people nodded approvingly. The federal judge raised her glass slightly. The executive team will be restructured based on merit, not nepotism. Margaret Stone will serve as interim CFO. The board will include at least 40% women and 30% people of color, reflecting the community we serve. You're destroying everything I built, Dad protested. No, I said firmly. I'm honoring everything Grandpa built. You forgot that Torres Holdings was never about holdings. It was about the Torres name meaning something. I turned to the security guards. Please escort the former executives out. Their personal items will be sent to them. As they stood, I added, one more thing. Any current employee who's been harassed, belittled, or discriminated against under the previous leadership should contact HR. We'll be conducting a full review. The teacher is now your CEO, Victoria spat as security guided her toward the door. Yes, I said simply. The teacher who understands that true power isn't about tearing others down. It's about building them up. Something Grandpa knew. Something you never learned. The room erupted in applause. As security guided my family toward the exit, Margaret Stone stood up, her champagne glass raised. I've waited 10 years for this moment. The room turned to her, surprised by the emotion in her voice. Harold Torres hired me when no one else would, she continued. A black woman CFO in Boston's Old Boys Club. Thomas fought it every step, but Harold insisted. She looked directly at my father, who had stopped at the door. You made my life hell, Thomas. The jokes, the exclusion from meetings, the time you accidentally left me off the Shanghai trip. I documented everything. Harold knew. He asked me to stay, to wait, to watch over Gloria when the time came. You conspired? I survived, she corrected. And I wasn't alone. One by one, 12 other executives stood up around the restaurant. I recognized them all. Department heads, senior managers, people who'd been with the company for years. We've all been waiting, said Robert Kim, head of development. Harold asked each of us personally to protect the company's true values until Gloria was ready. He knew you'd show your true colors eventually, added Sarah Martinez, legal counsel. Tonight exceeded even his expectations. Dad's face cycled through emotions, rage, betrayal, disbelief. My own employees. Gloria's employees, Margaret corrected. We work for her now. And Tom, that harassment I mentioned? I have recordings, emails, witnesses. Gloria could destroy you completely, but she won't, because she's Harold's granddaughter. She has class. Your grandfather would be so proud, Gloria, said James Wright, the oldest board member. He always said you were the only one who understood what he'd built. Victoria laughed bitterly from the doorway. A conspiracy. The whole thing was a conspiracy. No, I said quietly. It was a promise. Grandpa's promise to protect what mattered. Before security could fully escort them out, Richard Steinberg, our largest investor, stood up. Ms. Torres, Gloria, I want to be the first to congratulate you on your new position. He walked over and shook my hand firmly. Torres Holdings has been stagnant under your father's leadership. Too much ego, not enough innovation. I look forward to your fresh perspective. The Singapore deal, Victoria said desperately. Richard, you loved the Singapore deal. The deal built on fraudulent numbers? He shook his head. My forensic accountants flagged it weeks ago. We were about to pull out entirely. But now, with new leadership, his words triggered an avalanche. Other investors and partners began standing, approaching me with handshakes and business cards. We'd like to discuss the Education Foundation, said the CEO of Boston First Bank. Corporate social responsibility is our priority this year. The Waterford property could be converted to mixed-income housing, suggested a city councilwoman, if you're interested in community development. My firm would be honored to handle your legal representation going forward, offered a senior partner from one of Boston's most prestigious law firms. In 5 minutes, I watched my father age 10 years. Every handshake I received was a relationship he'd lost. Every congratulation was a nail in the coffin of his career. This isn't over, he said weakly. Actually, it is, Marcus Chen's voice came through the phone. I've just received confirmation from the board. The emergency meeting has been called for tomorrow morning. The motion to confirm Gloria as CEO is already secured with majority support. 51%, I said quietly. It's amazing what you can do with a controlling interest and the truth on your side. Security finally began moving my family toward the exit. The entire restaurant watched as the Torres dynasty changed hands in real time. Victoria made one last desperate grab for my phone, trying to snatch it from the table. That's company property. Everything about the company is mine, I finished calmly, pulling the phone away. Security, please. The guard gently but firmly took Victoria's elbow. She jerked away, stumbling in her designer heels. Don't touch me. Do you know who I am? A former employee, the guard said simply. Eleanor tried to maintain dignity as she walked, but her heel caught on the carpet. She stumbled, her Hermes bag spilling its contents across the floor. Pills, flask, a company credit card that would be canceled within hours. No one helped her gather her things. Dad walked in complete silence, his shoulders slumped, his earlier bravado completely extinguished. The man who'd commanded rooms for 30 years looked smaller with each step. They reached the door, the same door they'd pushed me through metaphorically so many times. The door I'd walked through feeling worthless, feeling like nothing, feeling like the family disappointment. But then Dad turned back. His eyes met mine across the restaurant, and for a moment, I saw something I'd never seen before. Understanding. He opened his mouth to speak, and the entire restaurant held its breath. Your grandfather, he said, his voice barely carrying across the room. He never trusted me. I know, I replied simply. I gave everything to that company. Everything. You took everything from that company, I corrected. There's a difference. He stood there for another moment. This man who'd been my tormentor for so long looking suddenly fragile and mortal. He saw something in you I refused to see, Dad said, his voice hollow. Even when you were young, especially when you were young. The admission hung in the air like a confession. He used to watch you in board meetings, he continued. You'd sit in the corner doing homework, and he'd say, that one listens, that one learns. I thought he was going senile. He was preparing me, I said quietly. Every Sunday visit, every story about the business, every lesson about integrity, he was teaching me to wait. For this moment. For the truth to matter. Dad laughed, a bitter, broken sound. You played the long game, 5 years of humiliation, and you never broke character. It wasn't character, I replied. It was survival, and hope that someday the documents would speak louder than the insults. I suppose you want an apology. No, I said, surprising him. I want you to leave. Apologies from you mean nothing because you're only sorry you lost, not sorry for what you did. I'm your father, biologically, I agreed. But Grandpa was my family. He's the one who showed up to my school plays. He's the one who celebrated my teaching degree. He's the one who saw me. Dad's face crumpled slightly. He never trusted me. Now I know why. Neither do I said simply. Goodbye, Thomas. He turned without another word and walked through the door. Eleanor and Victoria had already been escorted to the valet. The door closed behind him with a soft click that sounded like finality. The restaurant was silent for a moment. Then someone started clapping slowly. Then another. Then another. The applause washed over me like a wave, but I barely heard it. I sank back into my chair, suddenly exhausted. The adrenaline that had carried me through the confrontation was fading, leaving behind a strange mix of triumph and sadness. The restaurant slowly returned to normal. Waiters began clearing plates, guests returned to their own conversations, though many kept glancing my way with expressions of respect and curiosity. I looked at the empty chairs where my family had sat. The wine stain from Victoria's tantrum was still spreading across the white tablecloth. Eleanor's champagne glass sat abandoned, lipstick smeared on the rim. Dad's napkin was crumpled beside his plate, the food barely touched. For the first time in 32 years, I was alone on my birthday by choice, not circumstance. Margaret Stone approached quietly. Gloria? The board members would like to schedule a breakfast meeting tomorrow before the official vote, just to discuss transition plans. Of course, I said, my voice steady despite the earthquake inside me. 8 o'clock? Perfect. She paused. Your grandfather would be incredibly proud. You handled that with more grace than they deserved. After she left, I raised my champagne glass to the empty chair where Grandpa used to sit during family dinners. the one Dad had removed after the funeral because it was morbid to keep an empty place setting. "Happy birthday to me," I whispered, and finally took a sip. The champagne was perfect, French, expensive, everything my family valued, but it tasted like victory, like patience rewarded, like promises kept. For the first time in 32 years, I celebrated my actual birthday. Not as the family disappointment, but as Harold Torres's granddaughter and the rightful heir to everything he'd built. The next morning, I arrived at Torres Holdings at 7 a.m. The security guard did a double take when I swiped my new executive access card. "Ms. Torres! I mean CEO Torres?" "Just Gloria is fine, William," I said, reading his name tag. "How long have you worked here?" 15 years, ma'am. Your grandfather hired me." "Then you'll remember his rule about first names." He smiled, the first genuine smile I'd seen in this building directed at me. "Yes, ma'am, Gloria." He said titles are for people who need them. The executive floor felt different without the weight of judgment. My father's office, my office now, still smelled like his cologne and disappointment. I opened every window. My phone had been buzzing all morning, 300 emails, 50 texts, 20 voicemails. The business world moved fast when power changed hands. One email stood out. From Victoria. "Please, Gloria, I have nothing. Dad won't answer my calls. Mom, Eleanor, is leaving him. I'm sorry for everything. Please." I didn't delete it. I didn't respond either. Boundaries don't require cruelty, but they do require consistency. Margaret arrived at 7:30 with coffee and files. "The forensic audit of Victoria's projects is worse than we thought. She's been hiding losses for 3 years. We're looking at 50 million in overstatements. Criminal charges? We could pursue them?" I thought about it. "No, but make sure the board knows. And the investors. Natural consequences are enough. Your father has been calling board members all night. No one's taking his calls." "He'll learn," I said, looking out at the city Grandpa had helped build. Sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is nothing at all. By Friday, the full scope of my father's mismanagement became clear. Margaret and the forensic team had uncovered a decade of questionable decisions, nepotism hires, and what bordered on embezzlement. $10 million, Margaret reported in our morning meeting, redirected to shell companies owned by his golf buddies, all technically legal but ethically bankrupt. And Victoria's projects? Every single one is underwater. She was using new investor money to hide losses from previous deals. Classic Ponzi behavior. I could have destroyed them both with this information. One call to the SEC, one leak to the Boston Globe, and they'd be finished. Instead, I had legal draft a simple letter. Torres Holdings will not pursue criminal or civil action regarding past financial irregularities, provided all company property is returned and no attempts are made to interfere with current operations. "You're letting them off easy," Margaret said. "I'm letting them go," I corrected. "There's a difference." Eleanor had already fled to her mother's estate in Connecticut. The divorce papers were filed within 72 hours. Apparently, she'd been planning her exit for years, but stayed for the money. The employees, meanwhile, were transforming. People who'd been silent under my father's regime started speaking up in meetings. Ideas that had been dismissed were being revisited. The woman who cleaned the offices, Maria, stopped me in the hall. "Your grandfather would be so happy," she said in Spanish. "He always said you were the special one." "He said that about all his grandchildren," I replied in Spanish, surprising her. "No," she said firmly, "only you. He said you had the heart for this." I kept teaching one class at the elementary school. Some things money can't replace. The first monthly board meeting was scheduled for exactly 30 days after the takeover. I walked in to find every seat filled, and not one familiar family face among them. "Stock price is up 15%, Margaret announced to the room. "Best single-month performance in 5 years. Employee satisfaction scores," Robert Kim added, "are at an all-time high. We've received over 200 internal applications for the new positions created by the restructuring." And the Education Foundation? I asked. Fully funded and operational, Sarah Martinez replied. 100 scholarships awarded to employees' children for the fall semester. Full tuition to any state school as promised. Judge Martinez, who'd joined our board as an independent director, smiled. The press is calling it the Teacher's Revolution. Forbes wants an interview. No interviews yet, I decided. Let the work speak first. After the meeting, I walked through the building, something my father never did. I knew every employee's name within 2 weeks, their kids' names within 3, their dreams within 4. The company my grandfather built was never about the buildings or the deals. It was about the people who built them. Gloria, someone called from accounting. Did you see? The Waterford property got approved for mixed-income housing, 200 units, 30% affordable. Victoria's vanity project transformed into something meaningful. She'd predicted it would make us millions. Instead, it would make us matter. That afternoon, I stood in what used to be my father's office, looking at the portrait of Grandpa that I'd had restored to its place of honor. 10% to education like you always wanted, I told the painting, and the company name means something again. I kept teaching part-time. Some things money can't replace. 6 weeks after the takeover, Victoria texted asking to meet. I chose a small cafe in Cambridge, neutral ground, public enough for safety, quiet enough for truth. She looked different. The designer clothes were gone, replaced with off-the-rack professional wear. The entitled gleam in her eyes had dimmed to something almost humble. You look well, she said carefully. I look the same as always. You just never looked before. She flinched but nodded. I deserve that. What do you want, Victoria? A job, she said quietly. Any job. I've applied everywhere. No one will touch me after what happened. Natural consequences. I know what I did was wrong. Do you? I interrupted. Or do you just know you got caught? She was quiet for a moment, stirring her coffee. Grandpa always loved you more. He loved us equally. You just loved money more than you loved him. That's not... She stopped, reconsidered. Maybe that's true. He tried to teach me about integrity, but Dad always said, Dad was wrong about everything that mattered. I know that now. She looked up at me, and for the first time in years, I saw the little girl who used to be my sister before ambition poisoned her. I'm 28 years old and I don't know who I am without the company. Then figure it out, I said simply. That's what I did for 32 years while you all told me I was nothing. Will you ever forgive me? Maybe, when you understand that forgiveness isn't about getting your old life back. I stood to leave, then paused. I'll hire you back when you remember why Grandpa started this company. Not for money or power, but to build something that helped people build their lives. 6 months later, I stood before 200 employees at our first all-hands meeting under new leadership. The conference room was packed, with people video calling in from our satellite offices. Torres Holdings was built on a simple principle, I began. That business is about people, not profits. My grandfather knew that. Somewhere along the way we forgot. The room was silent, attentive in a way they'd never been for my father's speeches. We've returned to those principles. The Education Foundation has funded 300 scholarships. Our affordable housing initiative has created homes for 500 families. Our stock price has increased 40%, proving that doing right is good business. Applause rippled through the room, genuine and warm. But this isn't about revenge or vindication. It's about understanding that respect isn't inherited or demanded, it's earned and enforced. Documents don't lie, even when people do. And sometimes, the quietest person in the room is the one holding all the cards. After the meeting, I returned to my office, redecorated now with pictures from my classroom, awards from my students, and Grandpa's portrait watching over it all. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. This is Dad. Congratulations on the Forbes article. Your grandfather would be proud. I didn't respond. Some bridges, once burned, light the way forward instead of back. That afternoon, I taught my third-grade class. We were studying patience, how plants grow slowly, invisibly, underground, before suddenly breaking through into the light. Sometimes, I told them, the most important growth happens where nobody can see it. And then one day you bloom and everyone wonders how it happened so fast. Did you have to wait to bloom, Ms. Torres? Asked one student. 32 years, I said. But it was worth it. If Gloria's story resonated with you, please subscribe and share this with someone who needs to remember their worth. Comment below. Have you ever had to set a hard boundary with family? I read every comment and your stories inspire me. Check out my next video about a woman who discovered her husband's affair at their anniversary party. Until next time, remember, document everything and know your worth.